start with Ms. Ibu Dewi Fortuna Anwar. Ibu Dewi, time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Muhadi, for that rather lengthy introduction for all of us. And, firstly, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me, and also to congratulate the organizers, both UGM, University of Queensland, for bringing this forum together. I think this is one of the first big international conference celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Bandung Conference. And I'm very happy to see that the organizers are able to bring so many speakers from overseas. And I'm very, very excited also with the fact that several of the speakers are already old friends. And in fact, that was one of the incentives for me to come here, because I know that I will be meeting a number of old friends. Secondly, originally I was invited to speak yesterday, but because I had an important meeting, I postponed it to today. So I'm afraid that whatever I'm going to say has already been said. Especially, I read from the papers today that the Foreign Minister, Amitav, and all of the other speakers, have already laid out everything that has to be said about Bandung. And then I look at the panel discussions, every conceivable topic under the sun has already been discussed. So, as I said, I will just be repeating all of the points again. I've been asked to talk about this North-South dimension, theoretical and practical implications of the Bandung Conference on North-South cooperation. When I look at it, it's very little about theory and more about the practical. But I'm sure that usually when you're still doing your PhD, you'll be full of theories. So but I've been a bureaucrat for quite a while, so I've forgotten my theories. So you'll have to forgive me. And secondly, I said, since we're in the government, our brain is not able to digest long information anymore. It can only do things in PowerPoints. So please forgive me. So again, reiterating what I'm sure has already been said over and over again, that the Bandung Conference was the first ever formal gathering of Asian and African states. And as we know that during that time, most of the Asian African countries were still living under colonialism without a voice in the international arena. The Bandung Conference, of course, marked the desire of the peoples of these two regions, long separated by colonial rules, to become reacquainted with each other and to draw strength from a newfound sense of solidarity in facing their common problems, both at home and in international arenas. And I would argue, and I think that has been said by many people, that the holding of this conference signaled the desire and confidence. So it's not just a desire, but also the confidence of Asian and African countries to play a more autonomous role in international politics that transcended the Cold War ideological divides. Now, it's not really changed the realist or neorealist view, but I think it's attempts to challenge this realist and neorealist view that southern countries, small countries, should only be pawns in international relations with very limited choices, either just to bandwagon or to balance and so on and so forth. So this is at least an attempt to provide an alternative route to international relations. Now, briefly about North-South relations. Countries in the North, of course, for a long time, have been characterized as being the centers of modernity, innovation, industrialization, of dynamic entrepreneurship, achievement, rationality, and freedom. All the good things in life are usually to be found in the North, while countries in the South is always often been regarded, this is the Africa, Asia, and Latin America, were often defined as being mired in traditional institutions, undeveloped in their divisions of labor. There's a lack of utilization of their own resources. They have problems of overpopulations, They have rather undeveloped democratic polities, mostly undemocratic, with rites, rituals, and primitive customs. If we were to have stereotypes about the North, all the developed things, all the rationality belongs there. If you look at the North, it's poverty, crimes, diseases, all the social ills, is to be found in the South. At least that has been the prevalent perceptions about the North and South divide. The North-South relation is also more defined in economic terms. Some view the relation as development aid from the northern countries to the southern countries. This definition makes the relations to become very unequal, because the North is always seen as the giver, while the South is the receiver. So this North and South divides, I think, has become the major narrative of our problems of development. Now, the Bandung Conference clearly marked the beginning of the rise of the South in international affairs. I only briefly read the presentation by Amita yesterday, and he mentioned about one of the 5 points about that is, trying to overcome the domination of the major powers. But at the time, the issue was mostly on political and security matters, because most of the issues that were discussed was about political matters relating to colonialism or the global divides between the East and Western ideological divides. The Asian African leaders of Bandung in 1955 could be called as dreamers who envisioned an autonomous stance for their countries, not belonging to the West or to the Eastern Bloc. So there were 2 aspects, in fact, the problems of internal colonization issues and relations to the outside world, about having to choose between the West and the East. We also note that Bandung Conference was not really meant to establish a regional institution, either a regional institution like ASEAN or African Union. It was mostly held as a forum of solidarity between Asian and African countries to, I would say, to promote the can-do spirit and self-confidence in the face of the challenges in international politics. Bear in mind that at the time, the issue concerned was primarily related to colonization. Nevertheless, the Bandung Conference became the impetus for non-aligned movement, whose members altogether constitute the largest bloc at the UN until today. Following that, of course, came UNCTAD, and UNCTAD I marked the beginning of the continuous cooperation of developing countries with the formation of the Group of 77. And now, the Asian African countries have also committed themselves to cooperate through the new Asian African Strategic Partnership, or NASP, agreed 10 years ago during the 50th anniversary of the Bandung Conference. Now, the question is, can the Bandung Conference make North and South relations becoming more equal? How does the Bandung spirit pave the way towards a more mutually beneficial relationship between the South and the North? In 1955, we can argue that the Bandung spirit was successful in inspiring African and Asian countries to gain their independence from colonialism and strategic autonomy in international affairs. So I think that this remains very, very important. Besides, the other thing is fighting for independence from colonial rules, as well as the desire to find a middle way or an alternative way to the East-West global divides. So I would call this as a strategic autonomy in international affairs. Now, today, the Foreign Minister also argued that the spirit is still relevant in pushing these countries to strive for a more equal position vis-à-vis the North. Back to the core of the Bandung spirit, the core is a sense of solidarity, friendship, and cooperation. So, Bandung Conference should first and foremost strengthen and intensify the cooperation between Asian and African countries themselves. But as I said, while in the past, the focus was on a political struggle for independence and strategic autonomy, today the issues have broadened beyond this to encompass various other issues, particularly, economic as well. We now enter an Asian century where the dynamic growth of the countries in Asia, particularly in the East Asian region, has really shifted the growth from the transatlantic to the trans-Pacific as well. So the relations, the perceptions about Asia is no longer as stark as the stereotypes about, Asia being stagnating, lacking of dynamism, and so on and so forth. The Asian century has now introduced a new narrative about a dynamic Asia, and Asia that is putting a challenge also to many of the developed economies in terms of competition. African countries too is no longer simply a dark continent mired in poverty and diseases and so on and so forth, because African countries is also growing very, very rapidly. We can see a lot of countries particularly in southern Africa, where the economy is growing very, very rapidly. For Asia, Africa is now becoming an important market. Indonesia is just beginning to discover the potential of a growing market and as an economic partner. So this opens opportunities for Asian and African countries to intensify their cooperation in many areas in order to strengthen their position vis-à-vis the outside world. And this hopefully will also improve the leverage of Asian and African countries in relations with countries in the north. However, we also still have problems. While the stereotype about countries in the south is no longer completely true, we also know that many countries in the south remain weak and unstable. And recently, the growth of extremist ideology, misusing Islam, and terrorist organizations spreading all over the world from location in the global south have become global concerns that should unite rather than divide the north. That should unite rather than divide north and south. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is it often divides us. Also, one of the leftover of the first Bandung Conference is the Palestinian issue has remained unresolved. And this issue also constitutes a major stumbling block in relations between a number of countries in the south and the north. For example, between Indonesia and the United States of America, where we have a lot of strategic convergence, but when it comes to the issues of Palestinian and Israel, that remains one of the biggest stumbling block, particularly when you look at Indonesian foreign policy from the perspective of Islam, for example, that continues to be a major issue. So I would argue that the economic development of Asian and African countries will only be achieved if many of these political and security challenges are solved. So we would hope that the Bandung Conference should be used as a platform also to discuss these matters. Now, there are, of course, a number of areas of cooperation between North and South, since we now face a number of transnational threats to security, such as issues of climate change, contagious diseases, organized crimes, terrorism, asymmetric war, and so on. And to overcome these transnational threats to security, we need international cooperation. So regardless of our political, social differences and unresolved disputes, we need to deal with a number of very serious transnational matters together. And this, I think, is a new areas of cooperation for countries in the North and South. So in conclusion, before you give me my 5 minutes warning, in conclusion, I would say that first and foremost, the Bandung Conference was held to boost the can-do spirit, the self-confidence and sense of solidarity of the participating countries. The original purpose of this conference is still relevant in today's world, regardless of the dynamics and changes that have occurred. In 1955, the member countries were dreaming of independence. Today, the Bandung spirit can be utilized to achieve a more equal relation and mutually beneficial cooperation with the northern countries, given the economic potential of Asia and Africa. To realize it, the Bandung Conference should be an overarching platform to intensify concrete cooperation between Asian and African countries and discuss wide-ranging issues of mutual concerns. The spirit of Bandung should inform other regional forums, particularly the Dasar Sila, the 10 principles, I think, continue to be relevant principles in informing various aspects of international relations today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dewi.